Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Now, I noticed while I was going through and putting together different lists for upcoming episodes that Kanopy has just started an Action August category, and that kind of got me thinking. Action films aren't necessarily movies that I gravitate towards all the time, and I thought it might be kind of fun to sort of delve into a couple different categories of action films this particular month. And today, I really thought it might be kind of fun to focus on action films that have spawned either really interesting sequels, remakes, or films that are kind of inspired by the original version. And I've come up with a couple that I think will be very interesting to many different viewers. So whether or not you are a traditional action film fan, or if you're looking for something a little bit off the beaten path, I think you'll be able to find a few titles within this week's list that will appeal to you. Anyway, as always, all of these recommendations are available to you entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. And without any further ado, let's get to the recs. Okay, my first film that I'm going to recommend this week is available to stream via our Kanopy service, and that is 1954's Seven Samurai. Now, Seven Samurai is one of those movies that is so well regarded. There are very few best of film lists that don't include this. It's on BFI, AFI, the International Film Institute. I mean, it's very critically acclaimed, and it's critically acclaimed for a lot of reasons. Now, Seven Samurai is an Akira Kurosawa film, so yes, it is Japanese, so there are subtitles, but I still, as I always say, it is 100% worth dealing with the subtitles. Some of the action on screen is so worthwhile that you don't even necessarily need to deal with the subtitles. You can tell what's going on. Storyline is really, really seemingly basic, but once you get invested in these characters that are so incredibly full and fleshed out with so much, I don't know, life in them, it really becomes its own thing. So in Seven Samurai, we are dealing with a Ronin, which is just a masterless samurai, who decides to answer a village's request for assistance. This village is being, essentially robbed by this group of bandits every single time they have a harvest, which makes survival incredibly difficult. The samurai knows he can't fight off this entire horde of bandits by himself, so he essentially gathers together a group of 6 other fellow Ronin, and they become this sort of force to be reckoned with planning, they integrate into the group. You see them develop relationships with one another, but also with the village itself. And all of that serves to create this incredibly full storyline. Now, when this was being filmed, it took an entire year to film, just to film, not to like post-production it or anything. And it was sort of like rife with difficulties. Kurosawa, if you ever read any of his biographies, talks at length about all of the struggles that he faced, but so worth it, because when you actually watch the movie, it is just an absolute masterclass in filmmaking. There's some incredible fight sequences that are just, the first time I saw it, I just was in awe of what was going on screen. The choreography, and it is intricate because we are dealing with many people, and this is again 1954, so it's not like we're dealing with CGI and all of these other elements. It's all practical, everything that's going on, and it's just really phenomenally well done, and that storyline really gets to you. I'm telling you, the characters are so developed. So every time we see characters that we are beginning to grow attached to face off against something else, it really rings very true and it hits pretty hard. Um, Now, Seven Samurai is one of those movies that has been both remade and used as inspiration for tons and tons and tons of other films. Um, if you are a Western fan, the original Magnificent Seven with Yul Brynner is pretty much a lift of Seven Samurai. Um, so of course, since the original Magnificent Seven was a lift of Seven Samurai, the new remake from just a couple years ago with Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt and the entire cast of big names is also pretty much a direct lift from Seven Samurai, just told as a Western. You're dealing with that village of put upon people requesting aid from outsiders. Um, there was a fantastic sort of steampunk mecha anime a few years ago called Samurai 7. Definitely a direct lift of the Seven Samurai. Animation is gorgeous. The score is really, really amazing in that one too. So if you do happen to like anime, Seven Samurai is fantastic. Both the original Japanese cast and the dub cast. This is one that I actually listened to the dub cast after the fact, and thought it was really solidly done too. And then you have movies that they might be not be a direct lift or adaptation, but they certainly are inspired by that same kind of storyline. A Bug's Life from Disney Pixar, man, that is Seven Samurai. Um, and if you watch Seven Samurai, it makes Bug's Life even more fun in a lot of ways because I do love that movie to begin with. So if you like animation, Bugs Life is definitely one you want to look at, but it's fun because you can watch it with your kids, but you can also have all of these different cultural nods to other elements that your kids might not follow. And George Lucas has even talked about how Star Wars, in a lot of ways, has pulled a huge amount from Seven Samurai. And we see that especially as we go along in different episodes of the more current shows. Like Mandalorian has a storyline that is, again, almost a direct lift from Seven Samurai. Um, and I could just go on and on and on with mentioning other titles that pull bits and pieces of this story because there are so many. That's how influential this film is. That's what kind of legacy it's left behind. So again, if you are looking for a ridiculously well made film, whether you like action or not, whether you like samurai films, whether you like Japanese film, whatever, Seven Samurai is essentially like an absolute must watch. It is heartfelt in a lot of places. It is hard to watch in a lot of places. It is one of those movies that will 100% rip your heart out in spots, and you'll just keep coming back for more because it's just that good. So really, if you're just looking for a good movie, I cannot recommend this one enough. Again, it is available to stream on Kanopy. It's also available via our CleanNet service on physical DVD and Blu-ray. 1954 Seven Samurai, 100% must watch, along with the vast majority of the adaptations that came afterward, the adaptations and inspirations. Whether we're talking about Magnificent Seven, Samurai 7, the anime, Bug's Life, Star Wars, or the plethora of others out there. Okay, so our next recommendation is also available to stream via Kanopy, and that is 1979's Mad Max. Mad Max is one of those miraculously low-budget films that somehow managed to result in a multi-million-dollar franchise. I mean, installments to this series are still being made. They are highly anticipated. I know I regularly will hop on the internet to look up whatever update is going on about the upcoming installment to it, and there's always new news, and people are always like super excited to get like these little trickles of information. And it all started with this, as mentioned, low budget movie called Mad Max. It takes place in a not too distant future. We're definitely dealing with a dystopia here. The planet's resources have pretty much been depleted, which of course throws the world into chaos. War everywhere. You're dealing with famine. You're dealing with, economic crises. pretty much in every major nation. And Mad Max, which takes place in Australia, is dealing with sort of the fallout of all of that. Um, there is very little law left at that time, and what policing there is tends to be quite corrupt. The roads are essentially run by this vicious biker gang, and at the center of it, we have this guy who is essentially our last decent cop. He's the last guy who's not super on the take. He's not some sort of Machiavellian monster. He's just a regular Joe. And then his family is murdered, and ethics, morals, everything goes out the window, and it's just about vengeance. And that's what this first film is all about. Um, it's it's one of those movies where Max, the main character, you really see the arc over the spread of films. You don't see a huge amount of growth in the first movie, mainly because it's his de-evolution, I suppose, uh, into this sort of like fighting machine, who is so bent on revenge. There's just this vengeance and survival, and the survival is really only there so he can get retribution. Um, Violent as all get out. It's absolutely kind of a rough movie to watch. Um, but in that it's very much keeping with that vibe, because you are dealing with essentially the wild wild west of the world. You know, there's not a whole reason to be good in this particular future. They're good people, bad things are the only things that happen to good people in this particular universe. And that's really what we see in this first movie. Now, it is very, very well done. We're dealing with a shoestring budget here, and George Miller, who worked on this film, he worked on all subsequent films. He's working on, like I mentioned, all of these upcoming installments. It's clearly his baby. He has a very specific vision, and he's very, very effective at um, pulling you in and making things work, because you can tell it's a low budget movie, but not because it's all like, not because the effects are poorly done, not because of the lack of good casting. It's just it feels very low budget, but in the best kind of way, where you know the entire team has sort of like um, got that get it done mentality, and they are looking at the most artistic way to effectively make something look good on screen, and that definitely comes across. Now, Mad Max spawned two direct sequels, Mad Max 2 and then Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Um, of the two, I think the one that you hear about most would be Beyond Thunderdome, because it does star Tina Turner in some like iconic costuming. Uh, they're both in the same vein of Mad Max, like kind of just like gritty, entertaining films. You definitely see a budget increase as we go along, of course. But in 2015, Mad Max Fury Road came out. And Fury Road is, in my opinion, one of those movies that far surpasses everything that came before it. It's just amazing. It's also one of those sort of like sequels that you can 100% watch as a standalone. You don't have to have watched Mad Max, Mad Max 2, or Beyond Thunderdome to get a huge amount out of it. And it's really interesting because I wouldn't say that tonally it's shifted, but we are definitely seeing a very different side to things, because Miller has been focused on this hyper masculine universe for so long, because um, Max is like the epitome of that sort of man's story. But Fury Road, man, it really delves into a lot of really complex themes about feminism, about um, the insanity of these hyper masculine societies, and it delves into the importance of female empowerment, and it's just an incredible movie from the same guy. Like, that's what astonishes me about Fury Road, that it's still George Miller, and it's still a George Miller film. It's not like it's softened at all. It has not. Um, Still a hard R, still delving into incredibly difficult to watch storylines, but there's just something so evolved about it. And I just think it's a gorgeous film on top of everything else. And it did have a huge budget. It's not like we're going back to 79's like shoestring budget. It's not that, but it's it's all used effectively. Like, there's nothing that feels superfluous, even though it is a huge, massive film, and there's tons of extra stuff in it. And you can also tell that some of the elements that are part of Fury Road are things that Miller has been wanting to do the entire franchise, but just didn't have the option to do. Um, there's a race across the desert that is just, for me, one of the best sequences of filming I've ever watched. I geek out about this movie and the way it was made so much. There are a couple different versions. There's your traditional standard version, but there's another one where it's all done in this sort of gray steel, sepia toned darkness that makes the story all that much more effective. Soundtrack score, amazing, and the acting is fantastic. So the first three Mad Max films all featured Mel Gibson, who was very much a serviceable actor in them. You had a really solid cast in all of those that the budget would allow. Fury Road goes outside the box, man. You've got Tom Hardy playing Max at this point. Charlize Theron plays Furiosa. You have a group of this warlords, concubines, who are played by really fantastic actresses. They have like minimal lines, but they are pivotal characters, and so it's very important that the handful of lines they all have are done in a way that is incredibly effective, though it's very super concise. Special effects are amazing, but there were also a huge number of practical effects used in this that I didn't realize until I watched like a feature length behind the scenes about it. The amount of stuff that was done practically is amazing to me, and how it was done even more so. And then I was mentioning before, future installments, there is a prequel specifically about the Furiosa character that is in the works. That's going to star Anna Joy Taylor, and Chris Hemsworth is going to be in it. I mean, I'm very excited for that because I'm quite curious about that particular character. And I think if you watch Fury Road, you would absolutely be curious about it as well. And then Miller has talked multiple times about other installments he wants to make even beyond that. I am totally here for it now that he has a particular budget and we know how he's effectively using it. I would sit down for any future installment that he plans to make for this series because Fury Road was just so extraordinary. But yeah, this is one of those franchises that, rather than get poorer and poorer as we go on, which is, let's be honest, the way a lot of franchises go, total opposite. It goes from exceptionally solid, low budget beginnings to ridiculously amazing, high budget movie that will, I think, 100% stand the test of time. So that's, in and of itself, I think, worth checking out, simply because you don't get that kind of trajectory of storyline very often where you reach high points at the beginning and somewhere in the middle. That just doesn't happen. So again, the first one, Mad Max, available to stream on our Kanopy service. Definite must watch, along with Fury Road. As mentioned, you could definitely skip Mad Max 2 and Beyond Thunderdome if you don't want to watch them, if you're not super interested, because I will say they are not as good as Fury Road. Nowhere near. But yeah, Mad Max and Mad Max Fury Road, 100% must watch. Okay, a final recommendation for today is also available to stream on Kanopy, and that is 2000's Battle Royale. Battle Royale is based on a novel by Koshun Takumi, and if you couldn't guess by the author name, this is a Japanese film. So yes, it does have subtitles, but as I always say, totally worth the extra trouble. Um, Battle Royale is one of those films that will stick with you for a while after you watch it. It is considered quite controversial in Japan. It's hyper violent. It deals with violence and kids, and it's also a commentary on Japanese society. So it's got a whole lot going on. Uh, Storyline, we are dealing with a group of uh, Japanese students. They are, for the most part, considered problem kids, and they're essentially sent to what we're told is a deserted island. Once they reach the island, they are fitted with explosive collars. They're given a map, food, and each kid is given a random weapon. They're all told to go out and survive, and only one will be left standing. Now, there are lots of films that have the last man standing mentality to them. That's a trope that's all over the place. But this thing is something else. The violence, the blood, the guts, the gore are on another level. If you are not into that kind of thing, and if the idea of the violence involving essentially like ninth graders, if that's a trigger for you, then this is definitely not a movie to watch because it is ultra violent. It is insane, some of the stuff that happens in here. You can tell some of the team had like an insane amount of fun putting things together because practical effects and the vast majority of effects in this are practically done, and I always find stuff like that really impressive. These are like, this is my moment. The teams were really excited to put this stuff together. You're also dealing with a couple actors who are really, really, really in it. Man, they do such a good job of pulling you in. With these different personalities of these kids, you definitely grow attached to some, and it is a rough movie. In addition to like the blood, guts, and gore, since we're dealing with a last person standing situation, you're going to lose a huge portion of the cast. There are villains, and I mean there are villains all over the place, but there are definitely kids who are the villain characters. But I mean, just the society that puts them in this situation in the first place, whatever kind of behavior pattern they might have had, sending them off into like Death Island is definitely not going to be, a great thing. So, like I said, it is quite controversial for myriad reasons. Now, Battle Royale is excellent. I recommend it to people who are not going to be triggered by those touch points that I talked about. It has tropes in it that, as mentioned, are all over the place. We see it constantly. The whole last man standing idea is just there. From much more family friendly stories to like recent foodie movies, like The Menu is also a last man standing kind of situation, storyline. But the one series franchise that I wanted to mention that I think a lot of people might have thought of just while I was describing Battle Royale, if you weren't already familiar with, probably were like, that sounds kind of familiar, and it should. Even though the author swears up and down that she'd never heard of this story before, and I'm inclined to believe her. I mean, there'd be no reason to lie about it. And of course, the franchise I'm talking about is Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Games. Uh, you know, Last Man Standing is a trope. We see that a lot. It's just there's a lot of parallels. Battle Royale is a hard, hard R. Hunger Games is definitely a hard PG-13, and it's in English. So, there's the lack of subtitle barrier that's definitely appealing. I actually really thought the Hunger Game movies were well done. I enjoyed them. I watched all three. I read the books as well. And, I think they're great. There's also a prequel that is coming out pretty soon, I think, in the movie theaters. And of course, the book was already out. I read it. And, it's an interesting installment and take on some of the characters that we do see in the uh, standard line of films. Now, Hunger Games is dealing with a dystopian society where um, the world is split into districts, and each district must pay tribute with two children every year to be sent off to the Hunger Games, which is the same situation as the Battle Royale, where only one kid will be standing at the end of this fight. They're supposed to kill everybody else. And it's horrible, and it is violent. You're dealing less with the blood, guts, and gore that you are in Battle Royale. It's more like emotional. It is certainly a more Western storyline too. I mean, like it's definitely a story of the West. But you still got that same thread of kids being the ones to bear the brunt of mistakes that adults have made in the world. And it's emotional. You've got really great acting from your whole cast. I mean, from the adults to the children, amazing actors. Donald Sutherland is in it, and he's like one of these people who I know will always be a reliable performer. Whether he's doing something more comic or if he's doing something quite serious like he is in here. The primary leads of Katniss and Peeta are very well cast. Jennifer Lawrence and Josh Hutcherson, I want to say his name is, do a great job with those two main characters. This is Liam Hemsworth is also in here. You've got Woody Harrelson is one of my favorite actors, and he does an incredible job with his role in this. Elizabeth Banks is phenomenal. Visually stunning movies. Like the first one in particular, I think they because thematically you're dealing with what's supposed to be such a shocking disparate color palette and everything. I love the first movie and the way that it's made, but the other two are also excellent, or I guess other three films, other two books. But yeah, it's great. And Collins has, as I mentioned, sworn that it does. She's never seen Battle Royale, doesn't know anything about it. But I would say, as a viewer, you can definitely draw parallels. So if you liked Battle Royale and you want to see something similar, Hunger Games will work very well for you, I think. If Battle Royale sounds too hardcore, but you would be interested in a story that sort of deals with those ramifications, then the Hunger Games will be, I would say, much more uh, palatable, simply because it is pulling back where sometimes Battle Royale just barrels on ahead. So, uh, the Hunger Games films are all available on DVD and Blu-ray via our CleveNet service. So you can get all three of those, as well as the books, via our Kanopy service. So if you are interested, definitely check out Battle Royale on Kanopy. And I think they are really great picks with slightly different tones to speak to a lot of different kinds of viewers. Okay, so those were my recommendations for my Action August week. If you have any recommendations for actiony films that you think we should check out, please comment with those below. If you have any recommendations for themes you'd like to see covered in the future, definitely add those. I'm always looking for help with that. As always, thank you so much for joining me. I have such a good time putting these together. This week in particular was really fun to pick those primary titles and then look at the trickle effect of everything else that was related or inspired by. So yeah, one more time, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you next week. Bye-bye.